Performance and Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. All votes of the committee are conducted by a roll call vote. Please remember to be recognized and identify yourself prior to speaking, making a motion, or voting. Ashley, would you mind providing the audience the reasons why we are meeting electronically today?
This is Ashley Thomas, absolutely, Commissioner. This committee meeting is being conducted pursuant to TCA 8-44-108, permitting a governing body to allow participation by electronic means of communication where a physical quorum is not possible. As committee business requires action prior to the October 12, 2021 full commission meeting, the necessity of this meeting is for committee deliberation and actions on items set forth in the October 4th, 2021 agenda. This meeting is being recorded and will be available after its conclusion via link on the Commission's website. A call-in number was provided on the Commission's website for the public to participate, and a statement of necessity shall be filed with the Secretary of State pursuant to TCA 8-44-108.
Thank you, Ashley. Before we begin our business today, Chase, can you take a roll call of the commissioners, please?
Yes, ma'am. This is Chase Engel. Commissioner Sisnett?
Here.
Is present. Commissioner Griscom?
Here.
Is present and active now. Sorry about the delay, sir. And Chairman Richards?
Here.
Is present. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you.
It was right on time.
Very good. Today's agenda will consist of 3 reporting items for committee members. First, we will hear from Tess Stovall as she will discuss data trends and enrollment numbers in her school operational update for the 2021-2022 school year. Next, Melanie Harrell will present an LEA operations update for the body. Melanie's update will focus on the challenges and successes the staff have seen in our first school year and describe the onboarding process for new schools coming to the Commission. We will close out this meeting with a federal funding update from Melanie and Kelly Croman. Does anyone have any comments to make regarding the agenda before we vote to approve?
No, I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Griscom, I'll second.
Thank you both. Is there any discussion? Okay, Chase, please take a roll call vote.
Chase Engel. Commissioner Sisnett?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Griscom?
Aye.
Votes aye. And Chairman Richards?
Aye.
Votes aye. Chairman Richards, the agenda is approved.
Thank you. Our next matter of business is the minutes of the July 12th, 2021 meeting. Those minutes have been previously provided. Does anyone have any edits or comments to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed?
This is Commissioner Sisnett. I motion to approve.
Commissioner Griscom, I'll second.
Thank you both. Chase, please take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Sisnett?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Griscom?
Aye.
Votes aye. Chairman Richards?
Aye.
Votes aye. Chairman, the minutes from July 12th are approved.
Thank you. We will move on to the first item on our agenda, a school operational update from our Executive Director, Tess Stovall. I'd like to recognize Tess to provide this operational update to the committee.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing Tess. Is that just me?
No, I can't hear her either.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
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 Okay. All right. All right. To say what I was saying again, we are excited to share with you all, as we do at every committee meeting, a school operational update. We are 2 months into the school year. We have just under 2,000 students in the Charter Commission District. And as I'm sure you all are aware, this has been a very challenging school year for our schools and our educators across the state. And we are seeing that within our district, both excitement to have students back in the building, but also challenges of recognizing the learning disruption that students have seen in the last 18 months, as well as the continued health concerns as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we will use this opportunity to talk about what we are seeing at all 4 of our schools, as well as to preview some things we're seeing at the 2 schools we have coming up for authorization. So first, I want to give you all a quick highlight of the 2 schools that we have slated to open in school year 22-23 and where they are as it relates to the pre-opening process. So the first school we have is Rocket Ship Nashville number 3. This will be an elementary school located in the southeast area of Nashville. They held a groundbreaking ceremony for their facility in September. So they are well on their way, on their path towards construction of the facility. They have identified a school leader who is from within the Rocket Ship Nashville network. And that school leader has already begun community engagement, and they will be beginning to receive applications in January. This is particularly important on-ramp for this school because Rocket Ship, as their model, enrolls full grades K through 4 in their opening year. So this level of community and family engagement this early on is incredibly important for them to meet their enrollment projections. The second school that we have slated to open in 22-23 is Cornerstone Prep. This school is located in Memphis. They are still looking for a facility. As you all are acutely aware, real estate market these days is very, very highly both high in terms of cost, and there's a lot of people looking for real estate options. And so I have been in close communication with this operator as they continue to look for a facility. And they've actually submitted an amendment request to amend their charter agreement to start only with grade K, as opposed to starting with K1 in school year 22-23. The reason for this is that they want to expand their facility search, and being able to start with only 1 grade would allow them to potentially access more facilities than they currently have in their market area. So because we have received that amendment petition, the commission has 60 days to review and vote on that amendment petition. This will require a special called meeting of the Charter Commission. That is something that I'll work with Chair Griscom and Ashley Thomas on scheduling. This is something that is written and would be the expectation for any authorizer that receives an amendment petition. They have 60 calendar days to vote on that amendment petition. So this is a similar practice that we would see across the state.
Excuse me, Tess, this is Commissioner Cisnet. I had a question around I know, and this is not just for Cornerstone, but for any other operator that's looking for a site. I know in particular charter agreements, charters are essentially supposed to highlight a specific area or in the district where they want to locate. Does this put that in jeopardy, and what does that mean for any operator if they need to relocate to a different location other than the one that was essentially approved?
Yes, thank you for that question. And this is something that actually Ashley Thomas and I have been in constant communication with this operator, the specific question of, number one, how specific in the charter agreement do we get as it relates to the proposed location? I will say that we did not include in the agreement a street address because they hadn't identified a location at that point. We did put in the in the agreement, neighborhood information. And so the conversation that we have had with this operator is that if they are planning to move outside or be in a facility outside of those neighborhoods identified in the agreement, that would trigger an amendment to the agreement. At this point, they have not requested to change the geographic location of their facility, but more to change their grade structure to open up more facility options. But that is something that we have flagged for them so that we are both on the same page about what would be allowable within the current agreement versus what would trigger a conversation with the commission and force the commission to agree to those location changes.
This is Commissioner Cisnet. Thanks for that. I think I bring it up because I think as we think about this as a commission, what we don't want to be is a backdoor for operators who essentially petition to be one place in the district, don't get approved, appeal to us, we approve them, and then they go someplace else, particularly in areas that the district doesn't have a need. And so I'll use Hickory Hill as an example in Memphis. There, more and more operators are in the Hickory Hill location. Whether there's a need or not, the district might say there isn't, and I wouldn't want us to approve a school that petitions to be in, let's say, Cordova, and then once they get approved, they then find a location in Hickory Hill, because then we then create a bad relationship, one, with the district, but then two, we're not truly addressing the community's needs as we put forth just as a commission. So just wanted to make sure that we're keeping our eye out for that, because it can happen.
Thank you for that that question and that point. And this committee will review the amendment petition and the staff recommendation before it comes to the commission. So we will be prepared to answer those exact questions when we bring that petition forward to you all.
Okay.
Okay, so let's dive into the first of the 4 schools that are currently in operation. And let me share with you what we are seeing on the ground in both kind of what we are hearing, their focus for currently and then for the upcoming school year. So first we have Bluff City High School. This is the oldest school in our portfolio. They are in their 5th year. So they are fully built out, serving grades 9 through 12. Their enrollment currently is sitting at 535. You can see that they did test students in the spring on TN-Ready, and they did hit the 85% participation rate, which was required by the state to be held harmless against the rates on TN-Ready. And so you will see here on this slide, the available data, both in terms of academic proficiency, growth, as well as chronic absenteeism. So it's a great thing that this school is able to access this data and have this data as a jumping off point for the significant amount of work that is going to have to happen for these students in the upcoming school year. I think in particular, as serving high school students is always a challenge. I think during this pandemic, it was exacerbated. They saw a lot of students who, although they were offered in-person options earlier than the geographic school district offered them, they saw students who were still remaining remote, caring for younger children, working, et cetera. So you can see that reflected in their chronic absenteeism rate. This is a school that we have the opportunity to do a deep dive on this year because we are required as an authorizer to do an interim review because it's their 5th year. So the first step of that process is that they are completing their interim review report. And this looks at where have they been over the past 5 years in terms of their academic, operational, and financial performance, and where do they want to go over the next 5 years as they complete their 10-year charter agreement. Upon receipt of that report, we then as a staff will have an opportunity to not only conduct an annual site visit with the school in the spring, but also have a much deeper conversation about looking back and also looking forward to giving them their prospects for renewal in areas that we need to see improvement on as it relates to their renewal possibilities. So I think, although we are certainly concerned, and as I think across the state about where our academic performance is, I think it's a real opportunity for us as a commission right now to take a step back with this school and really dive into where they're going to go over the next 5 years. Some highlights, and I think are really good things that the school has going for them, is that they have a really strong leader and have had that strong leader over the last 2 years. That had previously been an area of weakness for them, of some leadership turnover. And secondly, they have a very strong network team. I think we see that across both financials and operations in particular, and we'll dig into this a little bit more, but we have very few licensure issues as it relates to the teachers at Bluff City. We only have 4 teachers that are still in the process of either renewing their license or receiving their current or original license. This is because Green Dot has a fantastic operational support team, particularly around human resources, that really makes this a priority. And so I really want to compliment them. I know we've complimented them via email and through our work, but I think publicly it's very important to acknowledge that the hard work that they do on teacher licensure, because it is incredibly important, but it also takes time and focus. And I want to make sure to acknowledge that as well.
Tess, before
Yes.
you go on, I don't understand what data suppressed by TDOE actually means. Can you help
Sure.
me understand that?
Absolutely. So from a FERPA perspective, if the in count of data is so low, either less than 5% or greater than 95%, the department cannot publish that data publicly. So the school knows what their academic proficiency rate is in math, and we as a district know that number, but publicly, because of FERPA, it's not able to be shared either in the data downloads, in the state report card, or on any public site. And so you're going to see the data suppressed a couple of different times, and that's really because the in count is so low that students could be identified, and that would be a violation of FERPA.
Okay, and my other question is, do we have an idea of what the Shelby County Schools 2021 high school chronic absenteeism rate was?
We could pull that. I don't have that right off the top of my head, but I'll put that on my list and I can follow, and we can share that certainly with this committee, and then be prepared to share next week.
Okay, thank you.
And Chairman, may I ask a question to follow
Sure.
your question?
Sure.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Griscom. So on the absentee piece test, do we have any way of knowing how much of this may be tied into some of the ongoing COVID issues that have been there and out there that we know have been an issue in Shelby County versus just general absenteeism?
So I think that based on the trend of this school as it relates to chronic absenteeism, their chronic absenteeism rate has always been on the higher end. I can look back into the data files to give you all a sense of pre-COVID what the chronic absenteeism rates were. They were certainly on the higher range, but it's also important to acknowledge that high schools generally are on the higher range. I want to say probably somewhere in the range of 25%, if I had to guess, but I will look back into the data files. So you can see that's double what they were in previous years. So that's completely exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. They were fully virtual until January. In January, they did give students an in-person option. Less than 50% of their students chose that in-person option. And I think it's always challenging to get high schoolers or really any student to log on. And I think they were seeing that. And so, if we are seeing much better attendance rates this year, but I think what we are hearing both within our schools as well as across the board is it is taking a lot for schools to get students back into the habit of attending school regularly. So this is not an isolated issue for this one school. This is a district-wide and statewide problem that I think what we are going to see, if I had to predict, is lower chronic absenteeism rates in the 21-22 school year, but not back to the pre-pandemic times.
Any other questions? Okay, let's proceed.
Great. So the next school that we are going to cover is KIPP Antioch College Prep Elementary. This school is it's serving grades K through 3. So this year will be the first year that it's going to be testing any students on TN Ready. So this is going to be a critical year for this school, but if I can see the trend lines and what we are hearing from the state is that I think what we're going to see is that the third grade proficiency rates are probably going to be lower than what they would have been in a non-pandemic sense because of the learning disruption that happened over the past 18 months. This school's chronic absenteeism rate is also suppressed by the Department of Education. I will say that one of the highlights for this school has always been a relatively low chronic absenteeism rate. I think that plays into the fact that they are elementary school students, and it's a little bit easier to get parents and students into the school. So want to congratulate them on the work they're doing around attendance. This school is continuing to build out. So they added the 3rd grade this year. That means they added a full count of grade levels of staff. With that becomes getting those individuals licensed and endorsed. We are seeing success at this school as it relates to their licensure and endorsement of teachers. I think and I can pull up the data, we have approximately, get you all the accurate count. We have 4 individuals who are still pending in terms of licensure or endorsement in the school, something that we're continuing to watch for them. But in terms of what you're going to hear about later, both Bluff City and Kip Antioch Elementary are doing a tremendous job as it relates to teacher licensure. I'm happy to take any questions about Kip Antioch Elementary before we move on to the middle school. So Kip Antioch College Prep Middle School this year is serving grades 5th through 7th. They have just under 400 students. They did test their 5th and 6th graders last year, and so their data was able to be published by the TVOE, and you can see what those rates of proficiency are. They were very pleased with what they saw as it relates to their English language arts rates. Were concerned as it relates to what they saw around math. So this is specifically an area where they are really focusing their tutoring and intervention to support students in the areas of math. Their growth data, as you can see, does reflect a higher growth in literacy than we saw in math. And again, their chronic absenteeism rates were suppressed by the department, but similar to the elementary school, a real strength for this school has been their attendance and chronic absenteeism rates. This school has additionally, as I shared, added a grade level, 7th grade. So we are seeing an entire new crop of teachers who have been hired in the last few months, and want to share that this school has 7 teachers that are still in the process of licensure and endorsement. We are continuing to monitor and work with the school to ensure that they are pushing these individuals through the process, as well as continuing to prioritize this as it relates to the pre-opening process. And wanting to really emphasize that this is an importance, this is a requirement of being a charter school in the state, and this is something that the Charter Commission will monitor and provide oversight on. And I will pause there for any questions about Kip Antioch Middle.
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Griscom. May I ask a question?
Surely.
Thank you. Tess, knowing that the issue of licensure of teachers is very important, do you have some sense or some update of teachers who have come into our system or come into charter schools, and are some of their approvals still working their way through the Department of Education, or have they not applied?
Yes, so what we have is that we have a list of teachers by school of where they are in their status. And so this school, as an example, has 1 teacher that's pending Department of Education approval, which means that they have submitted all of their information and they are pending approval. What is challenging about that, and what we try to explain to operators, is that the department runs on probably a 6 to 8 week lag time between submission of an application and approval. So if a teacher just submitted their application last week, we are easily looking into November before that application will be approved. And this is why we have to get them to prioritize all of this work much earlier in the summer, much earlier once individuals are hired, to be able to start this process. I will say that this is not a new conversation. This is something that we I spoke a lot to them about the State Board of Education that we have emphasized over the summer as they're getting into the pre-opening process. And it's a mere matter of prioritizing this and getting there as individuals to work through the process. I will say the schools that have the greatest number of teachers that are still either pending department approval or have additional steps that need to be taken in T-Encompass, which is the system, before they can be in the pending status, are KIPP Antioch Middle, and then we'll talk about it, our Nashville Collegiate Prep. And Melanie, if there's anything else, I know you've been intimately working on this topic. If there's more things you want to share with the commission on this front, please feel free to do that.
Yeah, I think certainly we've heard from some schools concerns about, and to a certain extent can understand, if you submitted paperwork in July for a person and for whatever reason there's just kind of a backlog, like that is a slightly different situation than if, this paperwork is not started or this process isn't started until September. So I think to Tessa's point about thinking through how we're making sure that in our pre-opening conversations, certainly we flag these things, but kind of have the really make sure that you're following up if there's any deficiencies in applications, make sure your staff is aware of what they need to do to make sure they have their praxis scores transferred or their transcripts entered. So being very, very specific and intentional around, we know there's a lag. We know sometimes that is, just a fact of the process, but still emphasizing the school's responsibility in starting this process and making sure it's being completed and followed up on regularly, basically as soon as that person is hired.
Okay, are there other questions? Tess, do you have other things you want to add?
Let's move on to the last school that we have in our portfolio currently, and it's actually the school that just opened. So Nashville Collegiate Prep, it opened its doors in August, serving grades K through 5. It has an enrollment of around 328. I will note this is close to the projected enrollment that they provided us over the summer, but it is less than what they were originally approved for in their charter application. Their charter application had them starting at approximately 460 students. So we're monitoring them as it relates to their budget this year to make sure that they're still able to meet their academic program priorities with this reduced enrollment. As with any school, in their first couple of months, in their first year or two, you're going to have challenges. We recognize this, and this is why we work so intensely with schools through the pre-opening process and into their first and second year to help them navigate these challenges of being under the commission's authorization and opening a school. And so I think this is always a good reminder of the amount of work it takes to open a school and the amount of focus on the little things that make it so that the school can be successful. So we have completed the pre-opening process. They have opened successfully, which we are excited to see. And Chase and Lawrence and I had an opportunity to be in the building a couple of weeks ago and see students and teachers in classrooms, which was really exciting. But they have definitely had their challenges, and I think things that you will have heard already, but wanted to take a deep dive here to let you know kind of where we are with this operator and these conversations. So first and foremost, there were some facility challenges and last minute things that they were not anticipating, and we were not anticipating. They were able to navigate those really successfully, and so I think that shows that they were able to manage the facility process, but a good reminder that facilities take time, facilities take money, and there will always be unexpected challenges. And so it's really important as us as an authorizer to make sure that when we're looking at an application, that they have both a plan for a facility and the capacity to execute, because it's so unpredictable as it relates to those, what's going to happen before you open those doors. Another challenge that we are seeing is around student information systems and actually getting students and teachers into the PowerSchool system. This is very time consuming. It is also incredibly important because this is how the school is ultimately funded. And so we have spent significant amount of time with this school, both training them and helping them to get students and staff entered correctly, to clear errors so that they're reported accurately. I just want to particularly shout out Melanie and Lawrence, who have spent many an hour supporting the school. But this is an area where both we continually reflect on how do we best prepare a school to open under the commission and be prepared to get this data entered accurately, but also support the school in knowing that they're going to have to figure this out operationally, and how are they going to be staffing for success. This is an area that is so critically important, and it cannot just be dumped on someone without really being thoughtful about what it looks like. And then the last thing, which is something that we've already talked about, but I think is of particular importance for this school, is they have had a larger number than is usual of teachers who are still pending licensure and endorsement. As of this morning, they have 11 teachers that are still in the pending process. What I do appreciate about this operator is that when we were seeing some pretty significant issues over the last 2 weeks as it relates to licensure, and not a lot of movement happening after multiple prods and reminders, they did receive the call of urgency and have acted both transparently as well as urgently to begin and to correct the issues as it relates to licensure. The challenge that we have talked about is most of these individuals are now pending licensure approval as of last week with the department. What that means is that they will likely remain in this pending process for at least probably the next month to 2 months. So we could have solved some of these issues had the operator gotten these pendings back in July. We're happy with where we are now, but both we need to prioritize and continue this process, as well as they have to start earlier than they did. The compounding issue that I want to share with you all is specifically around supporting English learner students. So they have multiple teachers that are in the process to receive waivers, but they currently have no one on their team who has an approved EL endorsement, which means no one on their campus could screen English learner students. They were able to pull a teacher from another one of their campuses to screen students, but that happened after the deadline had passed that is required to screen students within 30 days of enrollment. I had a deep dive with this operator last week, both with the representatives from the operator and the governing board, to discuss both the issues around licensure and the issues around English learner endorsements, screenings, and services. Made it very clear that while we appreciate what has been done over the last 2 weeks, we're concerned that it took basically a 4-alarm fire before that they internally realized that some things were not getting done in the way that they thought they were getting done. And that we are now sitting in this October the 4th, and we're well into the first quarter of the year. And so we will be continuing to monitor this school, both making sure that things get wrapped up and implemented for this year, and then asking them to really provide a plan for how are they avoiding these issues going into the next school year, because every year this is going to come. Every year they're going to hire people. Every year they're going to have to screen students for English language services. So the expectation is they need to have a plan moving forward. And the last thing I will say before I turn it over to any final questions from the committee is that we have communicated to all schools that the staff will be reviewing all licensure statuses as of October 15th. And at that point, we make some determinations based on the commission's intervention policy, whether or not there needs to be any further action, such as a notice of concern issued to the school and the governing board. Again, we know that these things are, these are relatively common things that happen, but also we know that a lot of these things could be avoided if things were started earlier in the year. And so we as a charter commission need to make sure that we are communicating the priorities to our schools and letting them know that licensure is a priority, as is student outcomes. And so we will be looping back with you all once the October 15th deadline passes, and we do another deep dive to see where we are on licensure, and we'll be updating you all as it relates to any next steps. And with that, I will stop sharing and happy to take additional questions from the committee.
Any questions or comments? I just have one. Tess, it seems to me, particularly with respect to our schools that are going to be opening next year, we really need to have a time frame that pushes our contacting them about licensure into the summer. As much concern as you're showing about, having a plan for facilities, this sounds to me like, you're reinventing the wheel every year. And it should be something I would look at, as a part of your opening process, to be pushing them to be doing this in the summertime. I realize sometimes they're still hiring in the summertime, but they need to understand that they're not going to get a pass on this if it's not done. Because I think that's been part of the problem, is that folks have thought, well, if we have it pending, that'll be good enough. And
I
the reality
appreciate
of it
that.
is you actually need it done.
Absolutely. And I think what we have previously done is we actually start flagging. They are required to submit staffing lists for the upcoming school year beginning in March. And so we are flagging this. I think the challenge is there is so much else going on that this is not always a priority. And I think, so we continue to reflect on what is, how much feedback can we provide to them versus you signed a charter agreement that said this is a basic expectation. This is nothing
Yes.
new. And so we continue to reflect on how can we both support, but also maintain the level of it's on you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
I
Well,
completely agree.
this year was particularly difficult because the spring we were still dealing with COVID, and we were in the middle of the vaccine rollout for adults, and a lot of schools were completely remote, and there were a lot of other problems for folks to be dealing with. But as we look into our schools that will be opening for next year, this is an area where we ought to try to instill some normalcy if we can, to try to push this along and have them licensed. Because I think it's one of the basic things that is critical to credibility and establishing a good process for getting the kids where we want them to be. So just a suggestion. Are there other comments or questions?
Yes, Madam Chair. Just along those lines, I really like how you framed it along with the facilities urgency, because I think we can step back and recognize that if the facility isn't there, the school isn't happening. And so if we could work with our operators to show them that we want to be good partners and emphasize that if the licensure isn't there, then good teaching isn't happening. If we're finding teachers in the middle of the summer, and I totally empathize. I've been there where there are 2 or 3 roles you really need to fill. You just can't fill them because you're looking for the best applicant, the best candidate. But at the end of the day, I think that the odds are against you when you're finding that person in the fall or late summer. There are a myriad of reasons why that's just not going to work out. And so if we can emphasize that March spring deadline, I think it's beneficial for all of us, because we then don't have to do the hard job of shutting the school down because of a lack of licensure or quality education happening.
Yes. And Tess, I have one last question and we'll move on. Given that we have the 4 schools plus we're adding 2 more, do you feel that you have adequate staff as we move through this year and into next year? I know you're going to be asking for some in the budget, but are we okay as we go through the rest of this fiscal year with staffs to support being the operator that we need to be? The authorizer that we need to be. I'll get it right.
No, I actually, yes. And I think this actually is a good segue to the next report out that Melanie is going to be sharing, because I think the area that we are acutely aware that we need to add capacity is in the LEA functions. And so we have 2 roles that we are hiring for over the next couple of months to add specific capacity there. And so that will relieve a lot of the, I think, the feeling that both we want to be good supports, but also recognizing that we're potentially doubling the size of the portfolio in the next year. And so that's going to take more manpower. And so I would say yes, and then let Melanie add in further. And then we can, if you have additional questions, we can discuss them.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, Tess, thank you for that report. We really appreciate it, and the patience in answering our questions and sharing your thoughts on how we're going to proceed. Our next item on our agenda is a presentation from Melanie Harrell to update the committee on our LEA operations, and I just gave her a great segue. So I'll recognize Melanie to provide this update to the committee.
Everybody see that okay? Yeah, okay. And can everybody hear me? Okay, good. Well, thank you all so much again. I know with Tessa's very detailed operational overview, we certainly know there are a lot of things that we want to be keeping in mind as we grow over the next year. And so I want to just give you some high-level overviews on our current work streams, some of the work that we've done thus far, and then certainly how we're thinking about this work moving forward and with the growing size of our portfolio. So the first thing I want to show you all is this should look fairly familiar to the committee. This is our LEA work streams overview. We have, let's make sure y'all aren't seeing yourselves. Okay. We have slightly realigned this just to make better sort of sense of staffing, how we are thinking about this work moving forward, although it's not substantially different. So our first 2 buckets of finance work, what we kind of call our agency finance and then our LEA finances pieces, are going to be primarily led by our new fiscal programs manager, Gomer Pasquale. Unfortunately, he could not be here today due to a commitment that he made long before he started this role, but we're very excited to have him on board and to have him diving into this work. Our federal programs and special populations work streams are still led by Kelly Kroneman. This is an area where, as Tess mentioned, we are very acutely aware of the need for more capacity, and we have taken steps to post a special populations analyst position to specifically help in the special populations work. I'll be talking a little bit more about that, but that is an area where we are cognizant that we need to grow the team and be able to provide additional support very quickly. Our 3 final work streams are managed primarily by Lawrence Walker. We will be looking in the coming months to hire an additional staff person to support this work, knowing as was mentioned in the previous conversation, this is a lot of work. A lot of it is very tedious, and it requires a lot of forethought and working with the schools very directly on managing all of the different data management and reporting requirements that come with pre-opening and especially starting the school year successfully. So to give you an overview of kind of our finance work so far, again, our most exciting update here is that we hired Gomer. Gomer comes to us with, I believe, almost 15 years of experience from TDOE. He was most recently the budget director. So he has brought a wealth of knowledge and expertise to our team. And something that I really tasked Gomer with as he started and is digging in on all the details, processing BEP payments, updating processes, creating new budget documents and things like that, is to really keep an eye on improving these processes and getting them ready for scale. So we've definitely made a lot of work in that area to make sure that our systems for reimbursements and fiscal management, that our internal controls are where they need to be, but that we're also preparing and being very critical to those processes this year to think through what are any shifts, what are systems that we might need to enhance, change, modify to make sure that we're ready to hit the ground running next year when we grow. So on federal programs and special populations, again, I know Tess highlighted, I think, some of the challenges that we've seen this year, particularly with EL services. So we have certainly, I think, come to understand that we give a very clear reporting calendar. We give a lot of guidance. I do think it is sort of one thing to hear about what expectations are going to be in the summer when, you know, there's a lot going on, but you kind of, these are things that are coming and not necessarily things that you have to execute on, as opposed to trying to figure out once there are students in the building. I know it is very difficult those first couple of weeks of school. So we want to make sure that next year we are being very clear about not only these requirements, but also kind of the best systems for communicating with schools. I think where we see the most challenge in some of these items and some of these areas is when the person who may be leading like a pre-opening process may not be involved once school starts, or if there are any sort of late staff transitions. And so I think something that we are thinking very critically on is making sure we are very clear about, you know, okay, if it's not this person anymore, like who is going to be, you know, maybe not just an HR contact, but who is the person that is responsible for following up and checking T and Compass for licensure issues. So getting very concrete about any time there are conversations that are changing, what the expectations are, again, while recognizing that this is a school responsibility and they need to be building capacity internally to manage these functions and make sure that there's an expertise there and knowledge base there to support this work. So we have actually, as of I believe Friday, all school plans have been submitted and approved in Inform TN. All of those were completed by schools on time. The consolidated funding application I'll talk about in just a little bit, but we have some updates there. We also submitted our comprehensive ESSER LEA plan and the ESSER 3.0 spending plan. We have worked with schools on their Title I requirements, including hosting a Title I meeting and what is called a parent's right to know notification. This is where those licensure flags are very important. There is a requirement under ESSA that any notifications or the notifications be sent out to the families of students that may have been taught by an unlicensed or improperly endorsed teacher. So we made sure that those went out. And then we are very closely monitoring special populations compliance and programming to make sure that we are providing schools with the technical assistance that they need to be successful, as well as reminding them of their obligations and holding them accountable. I think certainly at the forefront of our mind is making sure that students are being put first, and that when we talk about these compliance things, it's not just sort of like, we need you to check a box. It's students need to be served appropriately and in accordance with their needs. So I think that's something that we will have as an ongoing basis. Kelly and her hopefully soon to be hired support person do a great job working with school level teams in particular to make sure that we're touch points for the people that are delivering services. And then our kind of data management, assessment, and reporting work streams. We have had a lot going on. I know Lawrence got to dive headfirst into that immediately after the transition to from kind of the state board and all these systems transfers that had to happen to facilitate that. Lawrence has been tremendous at getting in the weeds and making sure that schools feel supported as they are troubleshooting these issues. So we have had, again, some needs for additional technical assistance, particularly to our new school with PowerSchool. Again, reiterating the importance that that data is accurate, that it is entered in a timely fashion, and that anything that is impacting state reporting in that system is addressed quickly. Since, again, as Tess mentioned, that is very critical to school funding and the accuracy of our information as a district. Lawrence has gone and has helped people, has set and done, in-person trainings as needed or virtual trainings to make sure that if there are any kind of gaps in understanding, we are helping them build that expertise and capacity to address those issues. We are currently working with ACT and TDOE and Bluff City High School on the fall assessment for ACT. We ran into a couple of challenges, again, in just the system management used by ACT related to the transition. We have worked closely with ACT and the TDOE to make sure that that was addressed, that did not impact their administration. And Lawrence is participating in a lot of ongoing assessment training and supports to prepare for TCAP in the spring and get ready for kind of the wider range of assessments that will be coming at us toward the beginning and middle of next year. Finally, on reporting and oversight, we manage these primarily first via the pre-opening checklist, which I know we've mentioned before, that is for our new schools that are being onboarded. But then we have a similar process that is used each month called the reporting calendar. So we try to include kind of every compliance thing that we can, every piece of information there. Certainly stuff comes up sometimes if there's a new initiative launched or a new requirement that's released. But we try to use that as our primary touch point with schools and host at a minimum monthly meetings, in some cases weekly or bi-weekly meetings with schools around reporting calendar items to make sure that they understand what all the items are, if they have any questions, and really getting to explain in some cases the why of why something matters. If this isn't just kind of a form that we need to go sit in a file, but it's a piece of data that is critical for your funding or is critical for some kind of federal reporting. I think that's something that we take the time to try to explain to them to make sure that people are understanding why these things are important and why compliance in these area matters. So we have been working closely with schools, again, on licensure and some of the challenges that we've seen there. We've also been completing and have completed all of our DCS checks, which is the background check that we have to run as a district on behalf of the schools. And then where schools may be struggling in any sort of compliance area, we are hosting additional check-in calls sort of above the standard reporting calendar meetings. So these are done if there are any individual issues that schools need support on. We're making sure to have kind of targeted support offerings for those schools. We are also keeping a running list, again, with an eye toward next year of everything, if there's anything that we think needs to be added, changed, improved about the reporting calendar. We have a running list of those things. And then we are also looking into any ways that we can think about streamlining this process to make sure that it is comprehensive but still manageable, both for our staff and for schools, without sacrificing any of the obligations that we have. So certainly something that we are keeping an eye on for next year and something that we talk internally a lot as a team about. The last thing I wanted to just give everybody an update on, because this is new-ish, is that the department relaunched what they had last year, which was a district information dashboard for reporting COVID counts in schools and districts. So this was just launched or relaunched about 2 weeks ago. So we have started collecting the confirmed student COVID case counts, confirmed staff COVID case counts, and then the number of isolated or quarantined student and staff members from our schools on a weekly basis. So those are submitted to us, to Lawrence on Fridays, and then on that Monday, it will be updated into the new district dashboard. That can be found on the TDOE's website and is available. You can search across the state for information. Something else that is noted in that is where there are operational changes or other required interventions that need to be used based on COVID case counts or the number of student and staff that may be quarantined. So things like if quarantine students are doing virtual learning, or if the school has to have a waiver for some reason due to an extreme outbreak or any issues that keep a substantial number of students and staff out of the building. That's also something that's being collected as part of that process. So that's been a good tool for us to not only be sharing that information publicly, but also make sure that we kind of have a sense of where schools are with their COVID cases and the mitigation that they're taking and some of the challenges that they're facing in those areas. So hopefully we will be moving in a more positive direction from that, but certainly an area that we will be watching closely moving forward. So with that, I wanted to pause and see if there are any questions.
Well, I'll start. This is Christine Richards. I'll start with my same question. How do you feel about your staffing for this year and particularly the rest of once we move into calendar 22?
Yeah, so I think definitely know that we need these 2 staff positions that we will be hiring. I think something again that we are being very intentional in thinking through is where we need more staffing and where are there any changes that we need to make to potentially to systems or management structures. So I think I feel very good about our 2 positions. I think they will be critical to our success. And I think we will definitely be keeping a close eye on any remaining positions as we get a better sense of number of schools next year, number of students, and kind of see where we're going in that lens. But I think right now I'm feeling very good, acknowledging that it will be critical to have 2 additional positions, and that the management and oversight of those work streams will continue to grow over time.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Well, Melanie, thank you so much. We really appreciate the hard work that our LEA team has done in navigating this first school year. And I know that you're focused on supporting the schools and helping them get the things done. And I particularly appreciate the additional support on the technology side, because that, if nothing else, is got to be hard for folks when they're first getting into this process. And they go through this kind of a transition from the people they had been working with to now the Charter Commission as their LEA. So with that, we'll move on to our final item on the agenda, which is a presentation from Melanie Harrell and Kelly Kronman on ESSER 3.0 funding and consolidated funding application. So I'll recognize you 2 and we'll go through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much again. This is Melanie Harrell. I am going to just kind of quickly give an overview, and then if there are any more detailed questions, Kelly and I are happy to kind of tag team responses to those. I will say this is an area which we've had several updates over just the past week or so around these federal funding streams. So I'll talk through some of the changes that may have happened since these materials were published for you guys. So the first is that ESSER 3.0 and our ESSER LEA plan. These were submitted back at the end of August, and this was a big lift for the team. So the LEA plan included kind of 4 big pieces. The first was what was called kind of the summary, or just the LEA plan generally, and that was a pretty high-level overview of the spending and planning across all of the ESSER funding streams. So something I did want to flag for the committee is that that included information from ESSER 1 and 2, which were, of course, originally managed and overseen by the state board, but those allocations and any remaining money from those have been transferred to us, as well as our ESSER 3.0 spending plans. So that is sort of when you see that, it is sort of an amalgamation of all of those funding streams coming together, and there's quite a bit of information included there. We also had to complete a needs assessment. We completed one at the district level. We also had our schools complete their own needs assessment and make sure that they were incorporating their findings from those into their budgets that were submitted to us. And then we had to create a health and safety plan, again, working closely with our schools to find out what their practices, policies, and procedures are in these areas, and making sure that we had those kind of aggregated and pulled together and submitted to the TDOE. We also had, as part of really the needs assessment process, a community engagement checklist that tracked stakeholders that were engaged in the development of the process and the process, as well as the school level individuals and what their stakeholder engagement looked like. So all of that was compiled along with the ESSER 3.0 spending plan into what was submitted to the TDOE. I did want to just share, of the ESSER 3.0 allocations, there were sort of 4 big focus areas that schools could identify and submit costs for. We saw that about 20% of the funding was allocated towards what were identified as academic initiatives. So those are things like summer programming, interventionists, curricular materials. About 23% went to initiatives to support educators. So those are things like class size reduction or strategic teacher retention or recruitment initiatives. About 32% went to what was called foundational elements, which was anything from health and safety, additional technology to meet needs, facility needs, or transportation. Those kind of were captured as foundational systems. And then about 25% went to student readiness initiatives, and that included things like support for special populations and mental health supports for students. So overall, we saw our schools really very intentionally think through how they were budgeting these expenses and make sure that these were aligned with their needs identified in their needs assessment. So I think I just got what I hope is our last piece of feedback from TDOE this morning. So we are hoping to address that kind of final feedback from TDOE. And my hope is that we will have our ESSER plan approved by the end of this week at the latest. So we have been working with TDOE on incorporating just a couple of pieces of feedback, making sure that areas are clear. And so again, I'm hoping that we will be able to kind of tie a bow on that and get schools in a position that they can start drawing down funds rather quickly. So hopefully we're nearing the end of that part of the process, and we'll be moving forward soon with reimbursements for schools. Before I move on from ESSER, are there any questions about ESSER in particular? Okay, great, thank you. The last federal funding piece I wanted to give the committee an update on is the consolidated funding application. What we found, this is where all of our kind of entitlement funding streams are put together into what we use as a school-wide pool allocation. So our Title I, II, III, IV, IDEA, those are all combined, sent to us, and we create a district level plan that is a roll-up of school level plans. There was a pretty significant delay in final allocations from the TDOE. So we got our final allocations about a week ago. Typically, you would get final allocations around September 1st, and we found that we got ours about the end of September. So what this meant is that the date by which we have to submit our plan for this consolidated funding, which pushed back to November 1st from what was originally October 1st. And we are working with schools closely to make sure that we're working through any issues that the delay in processing reimbursements may cause. So we have modified some of our processes to make sure that schools still have an opportunity to get a plan in, request reimbursement for October before kind of getting back on a regular schedule, but that's something that we are keeping in mind. So Kelly worked very quickly once we got final allocations to make sure that we ran all the numbers, that we got school level allocations figured out, and that we could get all materials to schools out by this morning at the latest. So allocations and materials, reimbursement packets have been sent to schools, and they have gotten sort of their final allocation numbers and an explanation of how those numbers were derived as well as of this morning. So I think in terms of high level changes that we saw between the first allocation and the final allocation was we did see a very slight decrease in our total allocation. That was due primarily to the slight decrease in enrollment from the original projection that was used. This was not too significant of an impact, but we did see that there was some slight change in the school level allocation composition if schools' projected demographics or student groups were different or in a significant way than they had initially projected. So one of the most important indicators was students in poverty. And so we did see some slight changes from initial projections versus the numbers that we kind of pulled for the start of the year for schools that slightly changed some composition of individual school allocations. So that was not there was not any significant loss to any school. There was just some kind of changing things around. And so we've again asked for the schools to send us back their final budgets by October 15th, and we'll be rolling that up into our district level plan by November 1st. Very excited to have those actually pushed out though and be ready to move forward with reimbursements on those funds. Are there any questions about the CFA?
Okay, no questions or discussions. Once again, I appreciate the work on ESSER and the consolidated funding application. It's a great opportunity to have these funds available for use in our schools, and look forward to getting some update on the progress being made because these additional resources were available. That being said, I want to check and see if there are any further comments or matters that we need to discuss. Okay, hearing none, I want to thank all of you for your attendance and participation at this meeting of the School Performance Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School. Since there aren't any further comments, do we have a motion to adjourn?
This is Commissioner Cisnet, so moved.
Mr. Griscom, I'll second.
Thank you. Chase, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Chase Engel here. Commissioner Cisnet
Aye.
votes aye. Commissioner Griscom votes aye. Chairman Richards
Aye.
votes aye. Chairman, the motion is approved.
All right, thank you. The next meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee is scheduled for January 27th, 2022. The next full meeting of the commission will be next week, and Commissioner Cisnet is going to cover the report from this committee for me since I will not be able to attend. So thank you very much for your help with that. And unless there are any other further comments, we are standing adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.